players. He was one shot out of 41st place. So he had not only a big stroke deficit, but a big number of players to beat in order to win. He shot a 10 under par in the final round to win by one shot. He finished so early because he was so far behind when he started that the final group, the leaders at the time, were playing the 8th hole when he finished. So this was quite a remarkable comeback. But I don't want to just look at the beginning of round 4. So let's take a look at some other sports, in this case football, and how do other sports rank comebacks. And this is from NFL operations that ranked the likelihood of comebacks in NFL games for the last decade, I think. And the number one comeback there was the Philadelphia Eagles and the New York Giants, that in the middle of the fourth quarter, the Eagles came back from 1 in 252 odds of victory. So quite a remarkable comeback. But you look further down the list and you'll see a couple that are tied for the lead there at 0.7%, 5 and 6 on the list. They both those games, the eventual winner had a 0.7% chance of going on to victory. But one had 8 minutes and 30 seconds remaining, and the other had about 1.5 minutes remaining. And you want to say, are those two equivalent? So should they be right next to each other on the list? Turning this back into golf, which do you think would be more impressive? Coming back from a 5% win probability with 3 holes to go, or a 5% win probability with 15 holes to go? So I asked a bunch of my golfing friends about this, and they said, well, yeah, 3 holes to go, that's got to be more impressive. Yeah, but it's 5% in both cases. So which is it? Is it the same or is it different? And I claim it's different. I claim it's different because here, if you take a look at this win probability path, you can see the minimum is around time 93. And I don't think that's as impressive because it's got to go from about 30% to 100%, but it's got a lot longer time to do it than at time 98, going from 41%. It's a much steeper slope. You have to go from that level to 100%. You have to make up all this win probability in a shorter period of time, which seems more difficult. But now how do you sort of reconcile those two? And this is the way we reconcile those two. We take a look at many, many events, take a look at the winners, and this is the median win probability path of a winner in a golf event. Goes from about 30% at time 90 to 100% at time 100. So I'm dividing time up into the first round is 0 to 25, second round is 25 to 50, third round 50 to 75, and the fourth round is 75 to 100. So this is a typical win probability path. What's not so typical would be to be at 30% at time 99. We're conditioning on knowing the winner. We know if you're at 30% at time 90 and you win, you're going to sort of march up toward 100, and it's very unlikely that you're going to be at time 99 still at a 30% win probability. Those are not equivalent events. So if instead of just looking at the median, we also look at the 25th percentile and the 5th percentile win probabilities across time, the lowest curve there is a 5% win probability curve. It's where only 5% of the win probability paths are ever below that curve at a fixed point in time. The other 95% are above. So that lowest win probability curve is 5 percentile of all of the win probability paths that end in a win. So it's very unlikely to be close to 0 with little time remaining. It's much more likely to be close to 0 with a lot of time remaining. Another way to see this, if we looked across the entire golf event, most winners have less than a 1% win probability when they tee off hole 1. If you have 150 players and they were equally skilled, they would have a 1 in 150 chance of winning. And you wouldn't say, wow, what a great comeback because this player won, because every week a player that has less than a 1% chance of winning wins the event, unless it's Rory McIlroy, one of the stars. So it doesn't make sense in the context of golf to take a look at the lowest win probability going to 100% without taking into account time. The way we take into account time is by looking at these quantiles. So we look at a win probability path and we see what is the lowest quantile curve that it touches, and that's how we rank comebacks. Okay? What's the lowest quantile curve ever hit by the win probability path of a winner to take into account this time phenomenon? Now we can rank events not just at the beginning of round 4, but throughout the tournament. Again, we looked at events from 2005 to 2020, and the top 2 were Kevin Streelman winning the Travelers and Justin Rose winning the WGC HSBC tournament. So, why is that number 1? Well, just again, going back to some golf intuition, the 2014 Travelers, Streelman shot 28 on the back 9. He finished with 7 straight birdies. And his comeback, we also say, when did that comeback start? It was with an hour and 15 minutes left in the event. The bottom, you can see what was his score to par. The top, you look at the win probability of Kevin Streelman there in red, and also his nearest competitors, Sergio Garcia and KJ Choi. And you can see how his win probability at 425 is about 0, and it goes up to about 100, but he started his birdie run before 425. A lot of those initial birdies didn't lead to a lot of increase in win probability. But this was sort of a remarkable comeback when we take the time into consideration. Okay, well here's another comeback that wasn't the top 5 on the list, but it was still pretty high up. It was in the top 5% of comebacks. Again, measured by this minimum quantile curve ever hit. So Paul Casey, you could see at 1 o'clock he was close to 0. It turns out that, if we rank this comeback, it would be at, 30% just before 5 o'clock, and he went to 100 at the end because he won. Okay? Well, how amazing was this comeback? Well, if we take a look at what was going on throughout the event, not just his win probability curve and others, but what was he doing? Well, Paul Casey birdied a lot of holes from, say, 1 o'clock to 3:30. He parred in from 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. He parred in and finished at 4:54. And he was tied for the lead. The event didn't end until an hour later. So he finished, his win probability was 30%. An hour later, he wins. So he's in the clubhouse waiting for everybody to finish. He was tied for the lead at the time he went into the clubhouse with a 30% win probability. His win probability went up to 100% doing nothing other than waiting in the clubhouse. Would you want to rank this as one of the most remarkable comebacks and put it in the top 5% of comebacks of all time? And the answer is probably not. So what's different about golf? It's a multiplayer event. In two-team sports, if you go from 30% to 100%, you're banging on the other team and doing a lot of good, or they're doing a lot of bad. Here you can go from 30 to 100% doing nothing, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So how do we take that into account? We define a new measure called a surge. A surge is going to be an increase in win probability due to the player's own play. So from one hole to the next, there's a win probability change. It can go up, it can go down. We're going to decompose that into the win probability change due to what the player did and a win probability due to what everybody else did. So Paul Casey, who had finished, his win probability is going up even though he's doing nothing, so the win probability due to Paul Casey when he's finished is 0. All of the win probability is due to what's happening to the other players that are out on the course. But we can also measure this during the event when there's a bunch of players out on the course. If player A birdies the hole and player B pars, and these are the top 2 that are likely to win, the win probability change due to the player could be 5%. Due to the others, it could be 0. So birdie, means a lot in terms of win probability. The par doesn't mean a whole lot. But you can also have a case where player A birdies the hole, and that would contribute to a 6% increase in win probability if nothing else changed. But if player B also birdies, that brings the win probability back minus 6%. So you birdie, the other player birdies, your win probability hasn't changed, but you get credit for the birdie in terms of a 6% is what would have happened just due to you, and the minus 6% is because others also match that. So you're like climbing up a hill, your birdie is climbing up a hill, and then you start sliding back a little bit when other players play well also. And of course, you could have a big win probability change if a player birdies the hole and the other player bogeys. You could get a win where player A bogeys, he goes backwards 8%, player B birdies, and they go backwards another 7%. So you could lose 15%, but only 8% is due to the player's bogey. So our method of ranking surges is to sum the win probability changes due to the player himself or herself over the remaining holes. And when we do that, the top two surges were Henrik Stenson at the Open Championship in 2016 and Rory McIlroy at the Arnold Palmer Invitational in 2018. So the Open Championship, their surge started, or Henrik Stenson's surge started at time 92, which was 3 hours and 40 minutes left in the tournament. So time 75 is when the first player goes off in round 4. The leaders go off later. So there's about 3.5 hours left when Stenson's surge started. So why does this rank number 1 on the list or tied for number 1? Because there is this great duel between Stenson and Mickelson, and every time Stenson birdied, Mickelson would also birdie, and so you had this great, comeback due to Stenson's own play, but then falling a little bit back because of Mickelson's play. This is what it looked like. The nearest competitor besides these two was J.B. Holmes, and you could see was many strokes off the lead, never had a chance of winning. It was a duel between Stenson and Mickelson, and you can see Stenson's win probability stayed at around 50% for most of the event until the last few holes when he pulled away. But he gets a lot of credit for all those birdies that were matched by Mickelson's birdies. So
making him a better football player. This is the data. This is the way the data is presented to the coaches. I mean, I haven't included change of direction on there, but these acceleration numbers for a particular team, our head coach gets that. The one in the middle is we do a SWOT analysis, and our head coach loves a SWOT analysis. So you're looking at what's his strengths, what's his weaknesses, and then what are your opportunities and threats. So change of direction, acceleration, distance that he gets, distance that he takes to get to his top speed, all that stuff. And then in opportunities and threats, you're actually looking at matchups. How can you beat this particular receiver? How can you beat this particular DB? Whom are you going to best match up against? Now, different coaches have different things that they like. A head coach likes the first two. Our defensive coordinator wants me to text him everything. So much so he spells my name wrong. But it's really, really fascinating to see what a coach actually likes and how you can actually communicate and get that point across. Again, we've applied this to our recruiting model as well. So this is Damani Richardson. He's on campus with us at Florida State now. Phenomenal player. Had a pick against Alabama last year. But actually taking this data, breaking him down, comparing apples to apples, seeing, all right, how does this guy actually fare up on the football field? Combine metrics are great and all that, but it doesn't really complete the picture. For example, if you're looking at receiver, you want to see, if you need a guy whom you want to run like long routes, go routes, post routes, you want to see what is he actually hitting on go and post routes, in his high school or in his college, so that when he comes to college or when he comes to the NFL, how can you actually use him? If you're just looking at combine numbers, it doesn't really tell you the whole story. And again, we do SWOT analysis on the kid, and we break every single recruit down the same way. So, how does that particular recruit line up against every single kid that we have played up against, every single kid that's on our team? Because at the end of the day, the goal is to fill the holes. We want to get somebody whom we don't have, some hole that you're trying to fill. If you get 5 players who are exactly the same, it's okay, but you'd probably do well if you have a little more diversity. You can probably run a lot more things. So here we're at the final slide. I sport. You do all this, but this is football analytics. It's really, really important to actually take sports science into account. Our quarterbacks wear biomechanic sensors. Our kickers wear biomechanic sensors. Everybody has a GPS. We use sleep monitors. We use force plates. We use node board systems. Taking all that data into account is very, very beneficial when it comes to actually completing the picture. Self-scouting has been huge for us. And again, combining information, combining variables is very important, because once you know your own strength is when it becomes easier to exploit what the opposition's doing. Since 2013, we have obviously, depends on cornerbacks and all that, but we have seen that we are able to execute a lot more successful plays.